Well, here in France, a high school principal has resigned after receiving death threats. A 26-year-old suspect has been arrested and is due to face charges in the case. This all stems from an incident at Maurice Revel High School here in Paris, which happened back in February. According to reports, the principal asked 3 female Muslim students to remove their headscarves. Witnesses said that one of the students resisted and that there was an altercation. We get the details from Khedir-Clifford.
For the headmaster at Lycée Ravel, the situation had become unmanageable. On Tuesday, pupils were told he had chosen to take early retirement for security reasons.
It's sad for the headmaster too. Everyone turned against him. It's a shame.
For the past month, he has been receiving death threats via social networking platforms. This after he asked a pupil to take off her headscarf, resulting in a dispute on the 28th of February. Contradicting versions of the altercation have emerged.
The headmaster caught her like this. He shouted once, twice. She didn't take it off.
Did you see it?
No, but my friends told me in detail. He caught hold of her and the girl didn't like it.
The headmaster didn't hit a pupil. He simply asked the student who was crossing the room to take off her headscarf.
On the 5th of March, the education minister visited the school to show her support to the headmaster. Protective cover was then provided to him. Despite this, he decided to leave his job. For the head of this head teachers union, it's a worrying incident.
It's a situation that could happen to any of us, because we make sure that the law and secularism is respected. And we can end up faced with those who want to break this rule. I've been talking to colleagues. It's difficult. In the same situation, what would I do?
Prime Minister Gabriel Lattanzio invited the headmaster to his residence this Wednesday. The student, an adult in a vocational training class, lodged a legal complaint against the principal, which was later dismissed. A cyber harassment investigation has now identified 3 of those who made the online threats.
And for more on this story, let's bring in Gabriel Lattanzio, a former high school teacher in the Paris suburbs and now an associate professor of English at the Sorbonne Law School. Thanks so much for being with us here on France 24. There is considerable fear on the part of school administrators when it comes to receiving threats. You know, statistics show that 1 in 3 teachers here in France have reported being the victim of face-to-face attacks linked to religion or secularism. You're a former high school teacher in the Paris suburbs, and you now teach at the university level. And you left that high school in 2021 because of threats of violence. So before we get into a more general discussion, can you briefly tell us what happened in your specific situation? What led you to leave your job in 2021?
Sure. I think it's a story worth telling. I taught university for 7 years until I decided to teach high schoolers, and I did that for 7 years as well. And in the context I was serving the public, the truth is that we faced 3 different times, we faced 3 murders. And each and every time, some of our students were involved in the tragedies in 2018, 2019, 2021. I felt, and quite a few of my colleagues felt as well, that it was our responsibility to alert, to tell people that teenage violence is an issue and we need to address it. They're the results of what we do as a collective, as a group. And in doing so, we felt we could fight against horror, really, because no one who is 13, 15, or 16 deserves to die under such, in such horrible conditions. Now, the 3rd time this happened in 2021, in September, I decided to do the same thing I've done before, which is tell the media as much as I could. And the consequence of that was that the violence eventually turned against me. This didn't have much to do with secularism. This didn't have much to do with headscarves, certainly not. It was just me alerting the fact that some kids are quite antisocial, and that's an understatement. That violence turned against me, and I didn't decide to leave. I didn't make that decision. I had the decision to refuse the offer that was made to me, which was that I could take a year off, pretty much, and they told me don't show up again. That's what I did. It was quite traumatic, but in truth, I've come out of that story feeling all the more resolute to talk about the best way we can help those kids, even if some of them are making tragic mistakes. And I'm not surprised at all by what happened the past couple of weeks with this principal.
Yeah, I was going to say, given the resignation of this high school principal and the fact that threats against teachers and administrators are on the rise, how do you feel in general now about safety in the classroom, and what's your reaction to this principal's resignation?
I think the media is doing its part, and I'm very glad that you're running that story. I think it's very important that we understand that students can be victims, of course. Of course, they can be victims. But with rumors and the way we talk to each other on social media, they can also unknowingly or unconsciously be those who might be partly responsible for rumors that might lead to people dying. That's what we've seen with Samuel Paty, Dominique Bernard, a number of colleagues, as you know, have suffered horrible tragedies. Now, the problem that we have, even though the media is doing its part, is that politically it's going to be really hard to have a team finding the solution. And here's why. The way people talk about it is they just see a problem, but they want to bring their own solution. So, for instance, the French far right will say, oh, we told you it's a matter of immigration. I mean, in this very case, you can make the case, sure, but the violence I faced had nothing to do with immigration, believe me. The right wing will say, where are the parents if they're rowdy, if they're not reasonable? Well, sometimes the parents are not so good. The left wing will say we need more schools, sure, but this will not solve the issue of how willing the kids are to respect the law. And the far left will just say, let's just not talk about it because we don't want to portray the problem at all because this would help the political adversaries. So I'm very skeptical that political teams will do that. So what we need to do is have a healthy conversation and say that this is not acceptable that a principal has to leave his job. You know, if you want the clearest indication that the world has gone mad, it is when you listen to some of the students involved in the story. Libération, the newspaper, wrote about it. You will see that still to this very day, the principal is described as someone who did something wrong. By the way, I'm no one to arbitrate whether or not he did. Maybe he did. But what I do know for sure is that death threats is immensely worse. And there's very little reaction from the public that state worker served in respect to the threats he faced. And that is chilling. That's really what we should focus on. We are not just people fulfilling a role. We are people, period. We're not just a mission. We are people with feelings and threats, and we know that some colleagues died. That's the situation.
Do you think that teachers and administrators have adequate protection?
Absolutely not. Now, look, I can complain when it comes to myself. It was difficult, it was rough because, you sort of don't know what tomorrow will be like. And the decision I made to go back to teach university was the way for me to try to look for meaning after a difficult moment. But the truth is that, they couldn't protect me where I wanted to be. I expected to spend the next maybe 15 years at the high school I worked at. I felt useful, and I was hoping to do that and address a lot of things, especially violence, but not only. And I could not. So, make of that what you will. But the best solution was to take me away from the problem. When you talk about school harassment and the way kids are protected, it's the same thing. Very often, it is the victim that leaves, not so much the one who did the mistake. Now, as for the story we're telling today, what we've learned is that the student who refused to respect the law apparently dropped out. And I'm not happy about it either, but the situation is just such a terrible mess. And I can't imagine what it's like for the colleagues that still work there. They'll have to do their best to make sure that people understand that death threats are no joke.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there. Gabriel Lattanzio, former high school teacher in Paris and an associate professor of English at the Sorbonne Law School. Thanks so much for joining us here on France 24.
Anytime.
French President Emmanuel Macron